Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 360, an intro to disobedience, the power of the divine order of Elohim, and the hierarchy of obedience. The podcast objectives are analyze the significance of your victory over doubt, analyze a scriptural blueprint for authority, and analyze the hierarchy of obedience. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. Take some more time to celebrate. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 113 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we concluded our series on faith and doubt, analyzing the role spiritual pressure plays in our attainment of great faith. That said, if you've been following the lessons, completing the assignments, and walking in the 7 pillars of our faith, then you, my friend, have not only mastered faith, you, my friend, have positioned yourself to reign over doubt. And so it's time for another celebration. To wit, we must celebrate your victory over all the degrees of doubt. To wit, in achieving this glorious victory, you have eliminated 4 of the 80 degrees of lawlessness, and not just any 4. You, my friend, have taken out 4 of the deadliest degrees of lawlessness, the 4 that are directly connected to the mother of all strongholds. Not only this, but you have magnified your mastery of faith by establishing your reign over doubt. Congratulations. Take a bow. And yet, I admonish you in the spirit of the watchman, don't let your guard down for 1 minute, not one single minute. Remember what I told you in my final word on faith and doubt. Namely, many difficult days are still coming, and every enemy you have ever known will soon be on the rise. You can see this by observing the image to the left. Vis-a-vis, you've knocked off despair, that crook, and yet he is only one of the fundamental degrees of lawlessness. And so you must knock off 19 more. Likewise, you have knocked off distrust, the first of the 20 focal degrees of lawlessness. And yet there are 19 more villains and thieves just like him. And they are all waiting for their turn to make a go at you. Then again, you have knocked off self-reliance, the first of the 20 critical degrees of lawlessness. And yet there are 19 more just like him, all of whom pose their own unique threats, and all of which represent the ultimate test. Last but not least, you have knocked off doubt, the first of the 20 primary degrees of lawlessness. And yet, there are 19 more spiritual diseases just like him, and they are all inflicting your being to some degree. Now, I said all of that to remind you that the race is not given to the swift, and the battle is not given to the strong. Brothers and sisters, the only victory we will ever have will come if, and only if, we endure until the end. And so, take some time to celebrate and to give thanks to the Most High Elohim for giving you this victory. But remember, the fight is still on. Your war with lawlessness is not over. The work before us is not yet done. A blueprint for authority. Now that we have initiated our reign over doubt, the next degree of lawlessness we must address is disobedience. You can see this by observing the diagram to the right, our preferred illustration of the mountain of lawlessness. Along these lines, disobedience is the second of the 8 primary degrees of debility. For your reference, the 8 degrees of debility are doubt, disobedience, contempt, prejudice, ignorance, deception, thoughtlessness, and rejection. And thus, by eliminating disobedience, we will have eliminated approximately 1/4 of all the degrees of debility. Here again, these are the degrees of lawlessness which promote spiritual weaknesses, depleting us of our spiritual powers. Of important note, disobedience is a core spiritual disease. To wit, disobedience is one of the 13 degrees of lawlessness which constitute the core substance of lawlessness, i.e., 13 spiritual diseases our enemies work day and night to infect us with. Along these lines, disobedience exists on a higher spiritual plane than doubt. To wit, doubt is the primary symptom of disobedience. And although doubt technically is a spiritual disease, its relationship with disobedience makes it more accurate to classify doubt as a spiritual symptom. This is clear to see when you understand that you cannot maintain your reign over doubt without eliminating disobedience. And thus, you must eliminate disobedience, i.e., the core disease, immediately after you eliminate doubt, i.e., the symptom of said disease. For that reason, it should be clear that disobedience is even a more formidable foe than doubt. Trust me, he will pose a wide range of challenges. And yet, if you follow the teaching and the training, you will defeat him too. By definition, disobedience is a refusal or neglect to follow the commands of someone who possesses authority over you. In accordance with this definition, it is important for us to understand and appreciate everyone in our lives who has authority over us. Fortunately for us, the blueprint for authority is in the word of truth. To wit, the Father has revealed his order and his hierarchy for the assembly and for the family. 1 Corinthians 11, 1-3 is revealing, become imitators of me, as I also am of Messiah. And I praise you, brothers, that you remember me in every way and keep the traditions as I delivered them to you. And I wish you to know that the head of every man is the Messiah, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Messiah is Elohim. 1 Corinthians 3:23 reads, and you belong to Messiah, and Messiah belongs to Elohim. Ephesians 6, 1 through 4 is revealing. Children, obey your parents and the master, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first command with promise, in order that it might be well with you and you might live long on the earth. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children, but bring them up in the instruction and admonition of the master. The hierarchy of obedience. Now, in accordance with these passages, men are to be subject, i.e., obedient, to Yahushua Messiah. In doing so, we are subjecting ourselves to Elohim, for Messiah is subject to him, which is why he is presently sitting at the right hand of Elohim, making intercession for all who are being set apart. Thus, we conclude it is impossible to be subject to Elohim if we are not first subject to Yahushua Messiah. This is why the scriptures refer to him as our example, and why we are commanded to follow his steps. And the only way to follow him is to obey him. This is how we know we are his disciples and accepted unto Elohim, the author of the eternal salvation. Ergo, we cannot be saved if we do not obey the one who is saying, "This is my son, the beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him." Now, continuing with the hierarchy, women are to be subject to their husbands, under the premise that their husbands are subject to Elohim through Yahushua Messiah. And thus, women, through their subjection to their husbands, are also subject to Elohim. From there, children are to be subject to their parents. And at the high level, that is the hierarchy of obedience. This is the order Elohim has established to ensure there is peace and harmony within every assembly of righteousness, which is a reflection of the peace and harmony between Messiah and Elohim. Brothers and sisters, we know this to be true, for the scriptures support the truth that charity, which is love, which is the pinnacle of holiness, begins at home. Therefore, the key to creating assemblies of righteousness is by incorporating families of righteousness that are following the divine order of Elohim, which is established upon the hierarchy of obedience, the source of our righteousness and our strength. And thus, if we fail to follow this order, if we refuse to operate within the guidelines of this hierarchy, we will find ourselves in direct opposition to Elohim. And alas, if we oppose his order, we oppose him. And then, of what value is our faith? Now, here is the final word. In every case, there's a price to pay if you should fail to trust and obey. If you can't see it now, trust me, this admonishing will become very clear as we progress these lessons on disobedience. Along the way, I want you to pay special attention to the fact that disobedience is strengthened by doubt. To wit, it is easier for us to disobey if we are already doubting. Along these lines, the persistence of the symptoms of lawlessness increases the strength of the core disease. This is why faith will play a major role in your victory over disobedience. For this leading degree of holiness will set the table for you to unleash the power of the ensuing degree on your path. Enter obedience. Therefore, even though we have moved on from faith, the truth is for certain we could not stay. And thus, I would yet offer a word of encouragement that we should continue to reign in faith, and all his people should pray. O thou whose tender mercy hears contrition's humble sigh, whose hand indulgent wipes the tears from sorrow's weeping eye. O shine on this benighted heart, with beams of mercy shine, and let thy healing voice impart a taste of joys divine. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on the word you have heard today, and as always, ask the Father to reveal the truth to you. For the children of Elohim live by conviction, and if he has not convicted you, or if you had not heard him concerning these matters, you should pray until you do. Today, I want you to meditate on the hierarchy of obedience. I want you to think about all the people in your life who have authority over you in accordance with the word of truth. Now, ask yourself this question. Am I obedient to those who Yahuwah have put in my life to have authority over me and to help me fulfill his will and his purpose for my life? If you answered yes, that's great. You, my friend, have passed the first of many tests associated with obedience. If you haven't, then I would encourage you to repent for operating outside of the divine order of Elohim and submit yourself to his order. Remember, our first major step in the way of holiness is a step of obedient faith. Ergo, even though you have unlocked the power of faith, you still have work to do. Vis-a-vis, you must defeat the spiritual disease of disobedience, and you must start by submitting yourself to the divine order of Elohim. That said, I would encourage you, pray to the Father that he guides you down the path you should take if you are in any way operating outside of his divine order. And be sure to seek out a spiritual leader or advisor to help guide you in the spiritual process. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 360, an intro to disobedience. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 361, The Spiritual Disease of Disobedience, Part 1. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.